Have you ever looked at a photo and felt that it hid more than it showed? That behind a smile there was a silent cry for help? There he is, in uniform, with his chest held high, the medal shining on his impeccable uniform. A hero in the eyes of the world. But no one knows that after the photo was taken he fought to sleep. And lost. No one hears the screams that echo inside him when the house is silent. And while everyone admires the image of the victorious soldier, few wonder what happens when he returns home, with the war still pulsing inside him. This is a story about invisible scars, the kind that don't bleed but throb every day, the kind that don't show up on medical exams but eat away at you from the inside. And maybe if you've come this far, it's because you know that feeling too, being surrounded by people and still feeling like you're fighting alone. Have you ever been through this? Stay with me until the end. What you're about to discover now might surprise you. When a soldier returns from the battlefield, the world around him expects happy reunions, hugs, parties, smiles. But the reality is that many return with their souls in pieces, trying to adapt to a life they no longer recognize. It's not just about military post-traumatic stress disorder. It's about memories that invade dreams, sounds that trigger alerts in the body, smells that transport you back to chaos, and silences that become deafening. It's about sitting at the table with your family and inside, still being in a minefield. It's about smiling for a photo but clearly hearing the war cries echoing in the night. How many soldiers return home, but don't return whole? They try to carry on, adapt, disguise themselves. Some get a job, start a family, take pictures smiling. But behind their eyes there is still the weight of everything they saw, everything they did, everything they lost. And with each sleepless night, with each suffocating nightmare, they ask themselves, will I ever be who I was again? Maybe you're not a soldier, but you know someone who carries a similar pain. Or maybe your own pain doesn't have uniforms or medals, but it still feels like a daily battle. This video isn't just about soldiers. It's about every soul who has fought a silent war and come back with scars no one sees. It's about people who learn to live with invisible scars and still move forward. Today, you will learn more than just a story. You will see what no one sees in a photograph. You will understand why a smile can hide screams. And you will discover that the real war begins when the soldier returns home. But before you continue, take a deep breath, because what comes next will take you even deeper into this invisible journey. And perhaps, when you heard this story, you remembered someone, or who knows, you recognized yourself in each word, in each silence described. Because the truth is that we all carry something that no one sees, and some carry an entire war inside their chest. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what has touched you the most so far. It could be a memory, a pain you've never been able to put into words, or just an I understand. What you share could be exactly what someone needs to read today to stop feeling so alone in this invisible battle. Here, each comment is like a beacon. It illuminates, welcomes, and connects. And if this content touched you in any way, don't forget to like the video. It may seem like just a click, but it shows that this message needs to continue, that stories like this have value, that giving a voice to these scars is important. Oh, and if you believe the world needs to hear more truths like this, with respect, empathy, and depth, subscribe to the channel. This is how this community grows. This is how we continue to bring stories that heal, that touch, and that make us look at others with more compassion. Your participation here is what makes this space exist, what transforms this video into something alive, pulsating, real, because we are not alone, and the more we share, the more paths to healing open up. And now, with our hearts open and our eyes turned inward, we continue this journey together, because what comes next reveals even more than a simple story. It reveals the silent struggle of those who try every day to return home whole. When he finally got off the bus, applauded by people who had never heard a gunshot, everything seemed so rehearsed. The flags fluttered in the wind. There were posters with his name on them, balloons hung on the walls of the house, and a table set with the food he had always loved. His father's hug was strong. His mother's was wet with tears held back for too long. Someone shouted, "Our hero is back," and he smiled. But inside, something didn't fit. He had waited so long for this moment. He had counted the days, crossed off the calendars, imagined every detail of his return. But now that he was here, back home, with his feet firmly on the ground and his arms around the people he loved most, he felt like a stranger in his own body, as if the war had left part of him stranded in the desert. And the rest? Well, the rest had just learned to survive. It's hard to explain what it feels like when everything is fine on the outside, but inside you there are still explosions happening. The smell of breakfast no longer makes you hungry. The touch of your little sister seems distant, almost unreal. And the silence, oh, the silence of the early morning, is now louder than any battlefield. During the day he makes an effort. He laughs at jokes, helps with house repairs, follows the family's plans as if he were trying to reconnect with an old script. But at night, it's as if the screams have taken up residence in his head, not the screams from a movie, real screams, of panic, of despair, screams that are unforgettable, that echo even when there is no more sound. Nightmares are not just bad dreams. They are disorganized, distorted memories that are mixed with guilt, fear, and an absurd feeling of helplessness. Waking up in the middle of the night with a sweaty body and panting has become routine. Sitting on the edge of the bed with your elbows on your knees and your face in your hands has become a solitary ritual, and no one sees it, no one suspects. After all, he's back, he's home, he's safe. There's nothing more to fear, right? But no one asks what it's like to live after surviving. No one teaches how to trust in peace again after so much time at war. And this is one of the cruelest hidden truths. Often, the battlefield doesn't end when the soldier is discharged. It just changes location. It is at this point in the journey that most people fall apart in silence, because there is an implicit expectation that now everything should be about gratitude, overcoming, and pride. But how do you rebuild a devastated mindset? How do you get back on track when your mind is still on alert, as if a siren is going to go off at any moment? The impact is not only in memories, it is in gestures, in relationships, in the small details of everyday life. He began to avoid crowded places, preferred to sit with his back to the wall, and could not relax even at family parties. Everything seemed tense, as if the world were a minefield and only he could see the signs. Sometimes all it took was hearing a gate slam shut or the sound of an old exhaust pipe for his entire body to react, as if it were about to protect itself from something. The war was over outside, but inside him, it was still active, alive, screaming. And that's where most people's blind spot lies. They judge the expression on his face, the way he speaks, how much he tries to appear normal. But no one asks what he's trying so hard to hide. Behind the scenes of recovery, there's a battle that few see. The fight to feel worthy of being alive, the attempt to find meaning in the chaos, the constant doubt, will I be able to move forward without losing myself again? And it's not just about war trauma, it's about any deep pain that changes the way we see the world. A pain that transforms our routine, that alters our decisions, that shapes the way we trust, the way we connect, the way we build. And when all of this happens in silence, with no one to validate what we're experiencing, loneliness becomes a prison. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because there is a moment, almost imperceptible, when the soldier, or any of us, begins to question, do I deserve to ask for help? And it is precisely at that moment that a lot begins to change. Comment here, I'm on this journey too. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because what many people don't realize is that there is an invisible line between the pride of having survived and the shame of admitting that one is not well. Upon returning, the soldier is faced with a silent demand to continue being strong. However, the strength that is expected of him is not the same as what he needs at this moment. Before, strength was physical, instinctive, focused on protection and survival. Now, it is emotional. It is a strength that requires vulnerability and that he never learned to use. And then a different kind of war begins. A war waged within the mind. A battle against thoughts that come without asking permission. You should be happy. Why aren't you? There are people in worse situations. Don't be weak. These thoughts, repeated silently, shape a new reality, a distortion. It's like looking in the mirror and no longer recognizing your reflection. You no longer know who you are without the uniform. You don't know what you feel. You don't even know if you have the right to feel. Behind the scenes of his pain, he makes small decisions every day. Decisions that, in the eyes of others, go unnoticed. Like leaving a family dinner early. Like ignoring a phone call. Like keeping quiet in the middle of a conversation. Like pretending that everything is fine. These are subtle gestures, but full of meaning. They are signs that he is losing himself, little by little, silently, within himself. The emotional toll of returning to civilian life is something that is rarely discussed in the depth it deserves. Most people believe that once home, a soldier should simply move on. But moving on is not a button you push. It's a journey. And on that journey, each step requires more effort than the last. Rebuilding trust, rebuilding feeling, rebuilding dreaming. It doesn't happen in a day or a week. Sometimes it doesn't even happen in a year. The inner transformation that occurs during this process is intense. It is as if the mind were relearning how to inhabit a peaceful body. But peace, after so much time at war, is frightening. It seems fragile. It seems temporary. And that is why many people remain on alert even in the simplest moments. The heart races for no reason. Breathing quickens at the slightest sound. And the mind creates dangerous scenarios where there is only routine. This constant state of vigilance drains you. It drains your energy. It drains your joy. It drains your will to live. And when you try to explain it, words fail you. Because how can you put into words the feeling of being in the middle of a party, and at the same time feeling like you're about to lose control? How can you explain that someone's touch, no matter how affectionate, can cause discomfort? How can you justify that you can't sleep for more than 3 hours straight without waking up startled? There is a hidden truth here that few people dare to say out loud. It is not easy to come back. It is not easy to find your balance again. It is not easy to rebuild your identity. The soldier does not come back the same, and that scares both him and the people around him. But pretending that nothing has changed only postpones the pain. It only sweeps the problem under the rug, until it becomes something even more difficult to deal with. It is at this point that he begins to ask himself, who am I now? He is no longer the warrior he once was, nor is he the young man he was before the war. He is someone in between these two versions trying to find a new place in the world, and this process of discovery is lonely, because few can understand the depth of what is being experienced, and those who try often give up, thinking they cannot help. But what many people don't realize is that sometimes what helps the most isn't the solution. It's being present. It's being able to listen. It's respecting this inner time. That's why every little achievement matters. A spontaneous smile, a firmer hug, a full night's sleep. They're like points of light in the midst of chaos. Signs that something inside them still believes, still resists, still hopes for healing. And this path of healing is not linear. It is made up of ups and downs, of good days and days that seem like a setback. It is made up of setbacks, yes, but also of courage, because continuing to try, even without guarantees, is an act of bravery. It is a reminder that true transformation does not happen when the pain goes away, but when it becomes bearable enough to allow the construction of something new. The most curious thing is that, often, this new something arises precisely from pain, because pain, when faced honestly, has the power to open doors, to reveal parts of ourselves that were dormant, to make us see the world with different eyes, more compassionate, more attentive, more human. That is why so many people who have gone through profound experiences, war, loss, trauma, end up becoming references of wisdom, even without realizing it, because they learned, ultimately, the value of life, and that changes everything. But what happens when, even with all this, the pain still persists? When hope wavers? When the past insists on knocking on the door, night after night, with memories that time seems unable to erase? This is a question that has no simple answer. But there is a turning point, a moment when everything starts to reorganize itself, and it doesn't come with ready-made formulas. It comes with a gesture, with a step, with the decision to no longer hide. Comment here. That makes sense to me. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because it's easy to imagine that war ends when silence returns. But what no one says is that for many, it is precisely in silence that war screams loudest. Lying in bed with the lights off, he closes his eyes and finds no rest. He encounters scenes that seem more vivid than reality itself. The dry crack of a gunshot, the strong smell of gunpowder, the muffled sound of screams, the eyes of someone he couldn't save. Everything reappears without asking permission, with the intensity of someone who is still happening. It's not just a bad dream. It's an invasion, a breach in the boundary between past and present. He wakes up with his body drenched in sweat, his heart racing, his eyes wide open as he tries to rediscover time and space. Sometimes, you don't even realize where you are right away. It takes a few seconds to realize that you're home, in your own room, with the walls around you intact, but your body has already responded. It's on alert, as if a bomb were about to explode. And the worst part is that, even without an explosion, it feels the impact. These early mornings are not exceptions. They become a pattern. Sleep becomes unsafe territory, a place where anything can happen again. That's why he avoids sleeping. He procrastinates at night. He pretends to be tired, but he stays awake until his body gives in on its own. And when he sleeps, it's as if he opens the door to an invisible enemy that knows exactly where to strike. An enemy that attacks with memories, some real, some distorted, but all painful. The mind, in this state, no longer knows what is safe. Any noise becomes a threat. A simple clap of thunder can be mistaken for artillery. A touch on the shoulder, even a light one, can cause a jolt. This is not an exaggeration. It is a reflex conditioned by extreme experiences. It is the body telling us that it still does not feel at peace, that it still bears the marks of a place where survival required total attention. In these cases, trauma is not an archived memory. It is an experience that refuses to leave the present. During the day, he tries to look good. He hides his tiredness with coffee, restrained smiles, and long silences. But if you look closely, you will notice his sunken eyes, tense shoulders, and his breath caught at random moments. It is as if he is always waiting for something that could come from anywhere. Suddenly, without warning, his mind has created shortcuts to fear, and his body responds before he even realizes it. This isn't just insomnia. It's fear, yes, but a fear with a name, a face, and a smell. It's the kind of fear that shapes behavior, that rearranges priorities, that transforms even the closest relationships. Because how do you explain to someone that, even when you're by their side, you still feel far away? How do you tell them that the bed, that place of rest for so many, has become a minefield for your mind? And all of this happens in secret. It's the backstage of a pain that doesn't bleed. He doesn't speak, not because he doesn't want to, but because he doesn't know how. Sometimes he doesn't even understand what he's feeling. It's like being trapped in an emotional labyrinth, where the walls are made of memories and every exit seems to lead back to the center of the pain. And even when he tries to speak, he feels like the words are too small to fit everything he's experienced. That's why he isolates himself, because loneliness, however heavy it may be, seems less risky than incomprehension. And this creates a void, a space where emotions have nowhere to go, where the screams of the early morning find no echo, where the tears stuck in the throat turn into pain in the body. It's a kind of internal exile. He's there, but he's not. And what few people realize is that in this process, it's not just sleep that's lost. Confidence, appetite, and the desire to plan for the future also disappear. Everything starts to revolve around trying to avoid triggers. Nights become threats, days become survival, and time becomes a burden. Because it passes, but it doesn't relieve. It just drags on. Still, there is something inside him that resists. A small part that still searches for meaning, that still wants to live without fear of sleep, that wants to relearn how to rest, to trust in the dark, to lie down without expecting an attack. But this part is fragile, and it needs space to grow. It needs to be heard. It needs to be recognized as part of the truth, not as weakness, but as a clear sign that there is still life there, asking for care. Comment here. That makes sense to me. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because there is a pain that does not come from what happened, but from what continues to happen when he tries to explain it, and no one understands. It is the feeling of being surrounded by loved ones, but at the same time feeling like he is on another frequency, as if he is speaking a language that no one else recognizes. He tries, carefully with pauses, searching for words that make sense. But how can you translate a battlefield into simple words? How can you condense months, sometimes years, of pain, tension, and loss into a few sentences that fit into a late afternoon conversation? That's where silence comes in. Not as a choice, but as a defense. Because every failed attempt to be understood leaves a mark. The expressions of doubt, the lost looks, the empty advice. Phrases like, "But now you're home. Just forget about it. It'll pass with time," seem to help, but they only reinforce the abyss. And he learns, slowly and painfully, that it's better to keep quiet than to try again. Better to swallow what he feels than to be frustrated once again by the lack of understanding. The hidden truth is that silence is also a form of survival. a way to protect others from the pain he carries, but also to protect himself from the pain of not being truly heard. It is a prison built with the good intentions of others, but with doors locked by loneliness. And this loneliness does not scream. It whispers. It whispers in the moments when he smiles forcedly, in the invitations he declines without giving an explanation, in the unanswered messages. It whispers until it completely disappears from the routine of others, who little by little move away because they do not understand what is happening. Little by little he realizes that his old friends no longer call as often. Conversations become shallow, visits become rare, and even those who promise to always be around little by little disappear without giving any sign. Not out of malice, but out of tiredness, out of fear, out of lack of preparation to deal with someone who returned from the war, but not in one piece. And he, in turn, begins to avoid meeting up, because being present and still feeling alone may hurt more than being alone all the time. It is at this point that loneliness becomes a pattern, a familiar, predictable place, and as cruel as it may be, it is where he feels that at least he does not need to pretend. He does not need to smile. He does not need to justify. He does not need to hide his lost gaze. The house becomes a refuge, but also a cell. The days pass slowly, dragged by memories that no one sees, by struggles that no one notices. His physical presence continues, but emotionally he is no longer there. The impact of this disconnection goes beyond isolation. It begins to shape his identity. He begins to see himself the same way the world treats him, as someone distant, difficult, cold, and he begins to believe that perhaps it is impossible to be understood. This changes his decisions, his connections, his way of relating to the world. The trauma, which was once emotional, begins to touch all areas of his life. Faith wavers, self-esteem plummets, and the future, which was once merely uncertain, now seems unattainable. But behind all this silence, there is still a latent need to be seen, to be validated, to be welcomed, not as a soldier, but as a human being. There's a part of him that still wants to tell what he feels, even without knowing where to start. That wants to build bridges back to life, that dreams, even in the midst of fear, of a moment when he will be able to breathe without carrying a burden on his chest. But this part only appears when there is space, when there is true listening, when there is real presence, even if in silence, on the other side. The journey of those who try to express their trauma is made up of failed attempts. But each attempt, even if it fails, is a seed, a chance to get closer, a possibility for healing. Because there is something transformative in being heard, in seeing someone stay, even without understanding everything, in feeling that finally someone is there, not to fix things but to be with them. And this presence, this acceptance can be the first step to breaking the cycle of loneliness. Comment here. I'm on this journey too. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, and because there is a cruel difference between the image that society constructs and the reality that the heart carries. When he walks down the streets with that firm posture, his hair cut to perfection, his gaze attentive, people see a hero. And in a way, he really is. But there is something dangerous about this label, because while everyone applauds the symbol, almost no one asks how the man behind the uniform is doing. The weight of the appearance of strength is silent but constant. It is like armor that protects on the outside but suffocates on the inside. Society admires soldiers for their bravery in the field, for their victories, for their medals, but they don't know what those achievements cost. No one asks what they had to leave behind, how many nights they woke up in a cold sweat, how many times they thought about giving up. There is a cult of the image of the invincible, and this cult, however well-intentioned it may seem, dehumanizes. Because heroes are not allowed to break, they have no room to cry, and much less license to say, "I'm not okay." This is where a hidden truth emerges, one that few have the courage to face. The strength that everyone venerates can actually be an emotional prison. Soldiers learn from an early age to endure, to swallow their fear, to silence their pain, and when they return home, this mentality remains. Only now they are no longer protecting a platoon, they are trying to rebuild a life. But how can you do that when everyone around you demands that you continue to be the same warrior, even without a battle? The trap is subtle. He starts to blame himself, to compare himself, to judge himself. If everyone sees me as an example, why do I feel so lost? If I am the strong one in the family, why can't I control myself? This type of thinking eats away at him from within, creating an invisible pressure that distances him even further from any help. because asking for help in this context seems like a betrayal of his own image, and image for him has become survival. The impact of this is immense. He smiles because they expect him to. He appears calm because everyone looks up to him. He says everything is fine, even when he feels like he's falling apart inside. And that's exactly why so many people take so long to seek support, because the fear of disappointing others is greater than the pain they feel. There's a false idea that showing weakness is tarnishing everything they've built, as if vulnerability were a failure and not a human trait. And it doesn't just happen to soldiers. This mentality extends to anyone who has been placed on a pedestal of strength. Men who provide for families, women who take care of everyone and everything, young people who grow up being told they need to be role models. All of these roles come with expectations, but rarely with room for rest. There is an emotional exhaustion that comes from the obligation to always be well, and this exhaustion sickens in silence. This is why so many people are exhausted even when they have no reason, because they are sustaining idealized versions of themselves while hiding the parts that need the most attention. It is an invisible war, and the most dangerous thing is that the world applauds precisely the disguise. It applauds the soldier who never breaks, the leader who never gives up, the mother who never complains, the young man who never fails. But no one realizes how much this applause can be a sentence, because the more they are celebrated for the image they project, the further away they feel from their truth. This disconnect between what he feels and what is expected of him creates a void, a constant feeling of inadequacy. He asks himself, am I still human? Could anyone see me beyond the uniform? Because yes, he is grateful for the tributes, the thanks, the applause, but deep down, what he wants most is to be looked at with compassion, not as a symbol, but as a person, with weaknesses, fears, falls, and desires to start over. And it is at this point in the journey that many transformations begin to happen, when he begins to realize that he does not need to choose between being strong and being real, that true strength often lies in allowing oneself to be whole, with light and shadow, with pain and overcoming, that accepting one's own cracks does not erase achievements, but makes them more human, more true. It is a change of mindset that begins slowly, almost imperceptibly, but that has the power to change everything. The way he sees himself, how he relates, how he lives again. Comment here. That makes sense to me. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because there comes a time when silence no longer serves as a shield. It hurts, it corrodes, and even without making noise, it exacts a very high price. That's when he finds himself standing in the middle of the room, with his hands in his pockets looking at the floor as if searching for some answer there. His mind is tired, his body is exhausted, his eyes lose their shine with each new day, and then for the first time a question arises that he previously refused to consider. What if I asked for help? But this seemingly simple thought is a game changer, because for someone who has learned to resist everything, admitting that he can't cope is already a downfall. The idea of seeking psychological or spiritual support seems, at first glance, the opposite of strength. But what he didn't know yet is that there is a type of courage that cannot be learned on the battlefield. The courage to look inside yourself. The decision didn't come overnight. It came in bits and pieces, small signs, a tiredness that wouldn't go away, a conversation interrupted by tears he couldn't hold back, a nightmare that made him scream in the middle of the night and scare the person next to him. It was in these details, which seemed too small to justify a cry for help, that he began to realize the extent of the pain he was carrying. And the more he ignored it, the more it manifested itself, the more it demanded attention. At first, he felt uncomfortable just thinking about sitting in front of someone and telling them what he felt. He didn't know where to start. He thought he would be judged, that he wouldn't be taken seriously. He was afraid of getting emotional, of showing himself vulnerable. But what he didn't imagine was that there, in that safe space, he would find something he hadn't felt in a long time. Listening. A listening without rushing, without judgment, without expectations. A listening that said silently, you can be who you are here. And so, slowly, he began to rebuild himself. Each session, each conversation, each prayer, even if it was interrupted, was like a piece of a puzzle that he thought was impossible to put together. Professional help opened inner doors that had been locked for years. The spiritual search brought a kind of peace that he had forgotten existed. It wasn't a noisy peace, it didn't come with ready-made answers, but it was like a ray of light inside the tunnel, and that was enough for him to follow. The most transformative thing is that he realized that asking for help did not make him lesser. Quite the opposite. It was in this seemingly fragile gesture that he rediscovered his true strength, the strength of those who choose to continue, of those who accept that they do not have to carry everything alone, of those who allow themselves to be cared for, even after having spent their lives caring for others. It is a change of mindset that cannot be taught in manuals. It is born from experience, from pain, and from the desire to live more lightly, and the impact of this begins to show in the little things, the way he looks into someone's eyes, the calmer way he breathes when he wakes up, the willingness to listen, to laugh, to simply be present. Little by little, the shield that protected him begins to become a bridge. He stops just enduring what he feels and begins to understand, to integrate, to transform. This journey, of course, was not linear. There were days of resistance, of relapses, of doubt, but now he knows that asking for help was not a sign of weakness. It was a conscious decision to break the cycle of silent pain, to break the narrative of the indestructible hero, and make room for the real man, the one who feels, who suffers, who fails, but who also learns, rebuilds himself, and most importantly, chooses to keep walking. Comment here. I'm on this journey too. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because pain, no matter how suffocating it may be, sometimes opens doors that only it could open. And it was in this heavy silence, in this inner space where everything seemed to be falling apart, that something unexpected began to happen. It wasn't a cinematic miracle. There were no voices from heaven, no bright lights. But in the midst of the confusion, in the midst of the question, why am I still here? A whisper appeared, a presence that could not be explained, but that also left no doubt. He was no longer alone. It was as if, even without understanding, he began to feel a kind of calling, not to go back to what he was before, because he already knew that was impossible, but to discover what he could still be. And this calling did not come with promises of easy answers. It came with pauses, with silences different from the ones before. Silences that did not push him into the pain but gently pulled him toward a new kind of listening, a listening that came from within, but that he felt as if it came from something greater. At first he couldn't name it. It was just a feeling, a brief respite in the midst of fatigue, a lightness that appeared almost hidden among the screaming thoughts. But little by little, he began to realize that there was something there, something that didn't depend on explanation or logic. It was faith, but not that rigid faith full of rules, dogmas, and guilt. It was an intimate faith, accessible, almost shy, that approached slowly, like someone who respects the time of pain. He began to allow himself small experiments, a moment of silence with his eyes closed without distractions, a thought of gratitude before going to sleep, even if the day had been difficult, a whispered prayer, without form, without rehearsal, but full of truth. And these small openings, almost imperceptible to those who see from the outside, became big steps for someone who had spent so much time defending himself from everything. The reunion with faith was not an escape from reality. It was a deeper dive into it, because now he no longer needed to understand everything. He just needed to trust. And this trust was built slowly, amidst good and bad days, with each small answer that arrived at the right time, with each sign that seemed like a coincidence, but that touched where it hurt the most, with each conversation that brought relief, even without promising a solution. This spirituality he began to live did not demand perfection. On the contrary, it welcomed him as he was, confused, wounded in process, and this made him stop fighting himself. He stopped demanding that healing be immediate. He stopped blaming himself for still feeling fear, for still trembling in the dark. He began to accept that the journey of the soul is different from the journey of the body, and that for some wounds, time does not heal alone. It takes faith, faith to stay, faith to continue, even without knowing what the next step will be. He realized that reuniting with God did not come with demands. It came with presence. It came with peace, not the kind of peace that makes everything stop, but the kind that sustains even when everything is still in motion. He began to realize the beauty of walking with doubt and faith at the same time. He began to accept that not having all the answers did not make him any less worthy of seeking them, and that true spirituality did not distance him from life, but reconnected him with it. This reunion brought profound revelations. He began to realize how, for a long time, He had tried to protect himself, not only from pain, but also from hope. Because hoping for something good requires courage. It requires making room for possibilities, and after everything he had been through, that seemed dangerous. But faith began to open cracks through which the light passed, and with it, ideas, desires, forgotten memories came, a new desire to build, to write, to speak, to be. Over time, he understood that it wasn't necessary to do great things to be close to God. It was enough to be honest. It was enough to say, even in your mind, I don't know where to go, but I want to keep going. And those words, spoken through tears, became complete prayers. And the most impressive thing is that he didn't need to do it in a specific place. Sometimes it was washing the dishes, listening to music, or simply looking at the sky. Because faith, he understood, is not about place. It's about connection. And this connection brought him back to himself. Little by little, he began to see himself again as someone worthy of living, worthy of loving, worthy of dreaming, worthy of feeling. And this internal movement had an impact on everything. He began to open up more to people, to express what he felt without fear of appearing weak, to embrace his story without having to hide it. And it was in this process that he also began to embrace the stories of others, to listen with more empathy, to embrace without rushing, to look into people's eyes with presence. The reunion with life came disguised as simplicity, a hot coffee that he prepared more calmly, a note he left for someone he loved, a walk without a destination just to feel the wind. Small things that before seemed insignificant now carried meaning, because he knew what it was like to live without the will to live. And now, every gesture was a declaration. I'm still here. And no, that doesn't mean the past stopped hurting. But now, the pain was accompanied by meaning. He understood that he didn't need to forget what he had experienced in order to move forward, that he could carry the memories and still build new ones, that he could respect what he had lost and at the same time, open himself up to what was yet to come. It was as if he had finally found a point of balance, a space between before and after, where life could begin again. Comment here. That makes sense to me. The sample paragraph contains about 526 characters, then to reach the approximate total of 7,000 characters. The next section needs to contain about 13 to 14 paragraphs of this size. Now I will create this sequel with fidelity to tone, narrative fluidity, and emotional depth, strictly respecting the 7,000 character goal. The pain is still there, not screaming like before, but whispering from time to time, like a memory that insists on existing. Only now he no longer despairs when it arrives. He breathes, closes his eyes, and listens, because he learned that running away from pain only prolongs the path. Facing it, even with fear, is what opens the possibility of healing. He still hears the screams, yes, but they no longer control him. They are echoes, they are traces, and he learned to name them, to recognize them when they appear, to understand that they no longer define who he is. At first, it seemed impossible to dissociate who he was from what he had experienced, but over time, he realized that it was possible to give new meaning to his own story, not by erasing what had happened, but by reorganizing what it came to represent. The scars are still there, visible or not, but now they are marks of survival, not of failure. They tell us that he fell, yes, but also that he got up, that he bled, but also healed, that he lost parts of himself, but found others he didn't even know existed. The transformation didn't come in a single moment. It happened in small, daily decisions. The choice to get out of bed even though I didn't feel like it. The choice to go to a doctor's appointment even though I was afraid. The choice to forgive myself for not feeling well every day. And each of these choices planted roots. Roots of silent strength, of calm resistance, of a faith that doesn't need to prove anything to anyone, just to exist. He discovered that living with scars is like learning a new language. At first he feels strange, out of place, misunderstood. But over time, this new language becomes part of his routine. He learns to listen to his body. He learns to decipher his silences. He learns to respect the days when everything seems too heavy. And most importantly, he learns that moving on doesn't mean ignoring what he feels, but walking alongside it, with humility, respect, and courage. The big turning point came when he stopped looking for the ideal version of himself, when he understood that he didn't need to be perfect, that he didn't need to be ready all the time, that there was beauty even in vulnerability. that admitting a bad day didn't make him less strong. That stopping to breathe wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. And that feeling fear didn't distance him from faith, but rather brought him closer to it. Because true faith is the one that embraces even the trembling of the soul. Behind the scenes of this healing, he also learned to look at others with more compassion. He realized that each person carries something they don't show, that behind many laughs, there are untold stories, that even those who seem strong can be struggling not to fall apart. And this made him more human, more present, more willing to be without rushing by the side of those who also face their invisible battles. This journey has brought revelations, like the fact that pain, no matter how difficult it is, can be a kind of portal, an invitation, a push inward, because before he lived outward, for others, for the roles he needed to fulfill. Now he lives from the inside out. He listens to his intuition more. He respects his limits. And even with the ups and downs, he has found a sense of direction that does not depend on circumstances, but on a firmer inner foundation. The impact of this change is subtle but profound. It's in the way he walks, in the way he holds a cup of coffee with more presence, in the way he talks to those he loves. He no longer needs to prove that he's okay, because now he knows he doesn't have to be okay all the time. He's learned to trust the process, to understand that every fall has something to teach, that every tear can water a new understanding, and that emotional healing is not a destination, but a constant movement. Today, he faces the days with a different outlook. He still feels the pain, of course. He still wakes up some nights with his heart racing. He still has moments of doubt, but he also has tools. He has support. He has faith. And above all, he knows that he no longer has to go through all this alone. There is an invisible thread that connects him to something greater, and that is what sustains him when the world weighs too much. The mindset has changed. The past is no longer a prison, but a bridge that has taken you to a more complete version of yourself, a version that knows how to listen, knows how to wait, knows how to start over, because starting over is not ignoring what happened. It is looking at everything you have experienced and still saying, I choose to move on. And this choice is an act of courage, a daily act, a commitment to life even after the war. This truth, that the pain remains, but the way we deal with it changes, has become the new foundation. He doesn't need to erase the marks. He just needs to remember that they are not open wounds but signs that he fought, survived, and learned. He learned that the soul, even when hurt, is capable of blossoming, that the heart, even when broken, can love again, and that life, even when patched up, can still be lived with dignity, with affection, with meaning. Comment here. That makes sense to me. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because what we call healing is not always a happy ending. Sometimes, healing is just the beginning of a new way of existing in the world. It is when someone, after so much silent struggle, finally understands that they no longer need to walk in disguise, that they can be who they are with all their scars, with all their history, and still be worthy of being loved, welcomed, and heard. And it is at this moment that something precious happens. They stop just surviving and start to truly live. When he understands that he is not alone, everything changes. Because loneliness is not just the absence of people, it is the absence of connection. It is knowing that there are people around, but that no one sees what you feel. And when he finds a space where he can say without fear, this hurts me, this affects me, this still lives inside me, it is as if an age-old weight is lifted from his shoulders. The truth is liberating, and his truth needed space to breathe, to exist without shame. This space, when created with sincerity, becomes a refuge. It becomes a home. It becomes a cure, because there is no cure without truth, and there is no truth without listening. The pain he carried behind the scenes began to be welcomed, respected, understood. Little by little, he stopped pretending. He stopped hiding. He stopped smiling when everything inside him was screaming. He started to say, I'm not okay, as naturally as he said, everything is fine. And that changed everything, because what was a burden became a bridge. What was a secret became a seed. That's why talking matters, telling matters, writing matters. Because every time he shares a part of his journey, he also shines a light on someone else's path. He gives a name to the pain that many cannot explain. He transforms silence into a bridge. And somehow he discovers that his vulnerability can be exactly what strengthens the other. That is the real impact. That is the hidden beauty of those who have decided to no longer hide their scars. Many people believe that being strong means not showing it. But he discovered that true strength is having the courage to show yourself whole, even in pieces, especially in pieces, because those who show their soul like this without masks invite others to do the same. And this invitation, even silent, is a powerful way to transform the world. Through empathy, acceptance, listening without rushing, there is a hidden truth in this journey. Shared pain does not multiply, it divides. When he allows himself to tell his story, he not only frees himself but also helps those who have not yet found the courage to start. And in this gesture that is so human, so simple, so full of purpose, he becomes part of something bigger, part of a movement that does not shout but transforms, a movement that does not demand applause, but listens, that does not point the finger, but extends the hand. The mission that arises from this is silent but firm, to be a shelter, to be a presence, to be a voice for stories that are often forgotten, because there are so many people out there who still smile in photos, but cry in silence, who appear strong on the outside, but are tired on the inside, who need more than anything someone to say, "I see you, I hear you, you are not alone." This is the strength of a community that chooses to care, that understands that healing is a process, that knows that each step, however small, is already progress. It is already a victory. And that's why this channel isn't just about videos. It's about building a safe space, a place where pain can be named, where hope can be rebuilt, where no one has to pretend to be okay all the time. Here, every story matters. Every report is a seed. Every scar is an honor, because every person who comes here carries something precious, truth. And it's this truth that connects us, that moves us, that transforms us. The journey of emotional healing is not a straight line. It is a road of curves, climbs, pauses, and new beginnings. There are days when everything seems to go wrong, but he learned not to blame himself. He learned to take a deep breath and remember that going back a little bit does not erase the steps he has already taken. The journey continues, and it is in this continuity that transformation happens. Real transformation, the kind that does not depend on the absence of pain, but on the presence of meaning. What unites us is not what hurt us, but the decision not to let the pain have the last word, because in the end that is what matters. What we choose to do with everything we have experienced, and choosing to transform, choosing to rebuild, choosing to reach out, is one of the purest forms of resistance. It is spiritual, it is human, it is deeply real. Comment here. I'm on this journey too. If you've come this far, it's because this message spoke to some part of you, perhaps a memory, perhaps an old wound, or perhaps a hope that you thought you had lost. And if this made sense to you, if this content touched you in some way, I want to invite you to continue this journey with me. This is a space of truth, of stories that heal, of encounters that welcome. Subscribe to the channel to keep following, because there are many important things that we will still talk about here. Take advantage and leave your comments here. I'm with you until the end. It's our way of knowing who stayed until the last minute, and who is building this journey together, with an open heart and attentive eyes. And if this video gave you a lump in your throat, or the relief of finally feeling understood, leave a like. This will help this content reach those who also need to hear these words. People who, perhaps, are on the other side of the screen right now going through something similar. And hey, there's a video here that complements this subject. Click on it and continue with me there. The conversation isn't over yet. The journey is long, but now, we no longer walk alone.